Hello, hey there students for life. This is Mo, your private lecturer, and I'm here on another video today to tell you about something which is considered a little bit boring, but it's essential and it's going to affect your marks and your grades, and that is called referencing. I'm going to be telling you a little bit about what referencing is. I'm also going to be telling you how to do referencing. There's going to be lots of different types of referencing that you're expected to do, different styles and so on. So we're going to be covering quite a lot in this video. So feel free to skip ahead to certain points of the video. I'll put in the link in the description below so that you can fast forward to learn which type of referencing and what you want to learn in referencing. Referencing has really affected all of us. It can be a very emotionally draining process to go through because it's so boring. You get a little bit stressed with it because, there's so many possibilities and chances that you could do something wrong or not reference correctly and so on. So there's a lot of things that referencing affects us with. But we're going to sort all that out in this video today. And actually, you'll be very pleasantly surprised to hear that referencing, academic referencing, can be used to your advantage. And it can be a very liberating process and eliminate stress from those experiences of when you're doing an assignment. Watch till the end of this video. I'm going to be sharing with you lots of hints, tips, and tricks on how to do referencing properly and also how to use it to your advantage. The problems of referencing, the two main problems are plagiarism and paraphrasing. Those are the two main barriers or problems that students face while they're trying to do referencing. When you're doing an assignment, you want to make sure that you're being creative, you're getting the job done, you're in the zone, you're focused, and you don't want to be stressed out or like in that lazy mode. And sometimes those feelings take quite a while to get away from you. In terms of a solution, there are many different sources of information that you could reference, like a website or a book. This is my book. I've made it into a guidebook, especially for students at university to help you improve your paraphrasing. The solution to do referencing in a really effective way that's going to get you those grades and also to eliminate the stress is to be systematic. You have to be systematic as a solution towards doing effective referencing. Now, what do I mean by that? You've got to work with your own pace, and you've got to work by your standards in terms of your preferences and follow a system or a structure that suits you best, because we're all different. It's going to encourage you to enjoy the academic process of learning. Your writing quality will improve if you use systematic referencing. I'm going to be asking you some very interesting questions. Now, those questions are: why should you reference? Do you know how to acknowledge authors? And why is that important to acknowledge authors? What does that even mean? Can you perform or produce academic writing? And what is academic writing? And why is that different from normal writing? Credibility. Do you have credibility? Is your assignment showing you credibility? Are you avoiding plagiarism? Because that is the big one that everyone is scared of, is plagiarism. How do you know when you're plagiarizing? Okay, these are all very important big questions. I will be covering each of those points on other videos. It's important to understand the answers to those questions to perform really good referencing. Are you scoring the marks or the points that you want in your dissertation or in your assignment? And also, how many marks or points are you going to be awarded if you perform academic referencing, systematic referencing? Okay. What are the main points? Number one, be aware of what type of referencing style you're required to deliver. The referencing style Is it Harvard? Is it APA? Those are the main academic referencing that is expected of students. It might be another referencing style. Whatever referencing style it is, make sure that you are aware of what that referencing style is that you're required to do at university, and ask your professor or your lecturer or your head of department on those questions. But in this video, we're going to be sticking with the Harvard referencing style. That's the one that we're going to be covering. The Harvard referencing style is quite similar to APA. Be aware of the preferences that your university or your lecturer or your professor or your marker, your head of department, which preferences do they prefer? Because within the Harvard style referencing, there are very small but slight variations of that. This is the unfair part. It happens, so you should really pay attention to that, and the only way to solve that is by communicating with your supervisor, talking with your lecturer, the person that's giving you the marks, and so on. Find out what those preferences are of the Harvard style referencing system, or whatever referencing system it is they want to use, okay? You need to know about that. For example, one professor might prefer you to put a little full stop somewhere here, or make a little indentation, all kinds of tiny little changes that you might not be aware of to begin with, because you're following the standard Harvard referencing style, which is perfectly fine and acceptable, but your professor or your marker or whoever might get a little bit fussy about that. Try to be aware of those tiny little changes that they want you to deliver on. In terms of referencing, any type of referencing, there are two different dimensions. The first dimension of referencing is citations, or citing. Now, citations and citing is going to acknowledge the author or the editors. You're basically acknowledging them, and you're telling your reader directly in the main text, in the main body of your assignment. That's called in-text citations. It's important to clarify what they are and how to do them properly. And there's a few ways, variations of doing that. How do you cite an author or a source? How do you do that? And what types of methods are there of citing? Because citing could be quite creative, and it gives you a chance to express yourself or get your main points across to the reader in very different ways, okay? So there are different strategies of citing, and you can use citing in two different ways. What are some of the main ways of citing in text? Citing an author, acknowledging them, giving them credit. There are two ways of citing, and those are citing a direct quote. So if you're citing a direct quote in your assignment in text, what you have to do, first of all, the direct quote has to be in quotation marks. You have to have quotation marks at the beginning and the end of your direct quote. And what is a direct quote? A direct quote is when you are taking a piece of your source, word for word, exactly how it is, and you're taking it and you're putting it into your assignment. It's very important to do direct quotes very academically and professionally, because you don't want to risk plagiarizing, because sometimes with most students, if they do the direct quotes slightly wrong, they forget to put the quotation marks either side, or if that text looks like it's maybe part of their assignment, their normal text, the marker could get confused. So you don't want to confuse the marker. Tell the reader or the marker that this is a direct quote and you're citing it correctly as a direct quote. And you could put the text in italics sometimes, but it has to be in quotation marks, okay, at the beginning and the end. Put the citation, this is the main point, the citation, usually it should go at the end of your direct quote, and the citation should be the author's last name and the year of the publication, followed by the page numbers, like that. PP with the page numbers. If the page numbers are not available, then you don't need to put that information, but if that information is available to you, you should include the page numbers as well. And of course, all that information goes in brackets with a full stop at the end. That's how you cite a direct quote. If you're doing direct quotes, make sure it's no more than 2 lines. Anything more than 2 lines is too much. You can probably make a direct quote longer than that. You could take a lot of a direct quote from the original source. But try not to get too greedy, because then the marker's going to see that and he's going to think, I'm going to mark him down slightly because he hasn't shown enough effort to paraphrase that direct quote, or to paraphrase that source. Direct quotes are quite good for pieces of information that are very specific types of information. Information that is too difficult or too hard to paraphrase. That's the first type of citation that you can do, is a direct quote. The second type of citations that you can do is when you are paraphrasing. You might find some information from a source or a book or whatever somewhere, and you decided to paraphrase that information, which means writing it in your own words. I specialize in paraphrasing. This is how I mainly help my students, to teach them the tricks of the trade of how to do paraphrasing really well. And of course, you can learn how to do academic paraphrasing in my book, which you will find in the link in the description below. That's the second type of citation that you can do, paraphrasing the work, writing it in your own words, and keeping the main meaning of that information. But what I want to make you aware of is that when you're paraphrasing some work and you're putting the citation, should go at the beginning or the end of that paraphrase. And usually there are 2 ways of citing paraphrased sources in your work. And those 2 ways are including the names of the authors into the writing style of your paraphrase. So what does that mean? So you could start off by saying, according to Jones, 2012. So the reader will automatically know that you are citing Jones 2012 because you've brought him into the discussion. You can create a discussion, and this is the creative part, the benefits of referencing systematically and referencing, to be creative, to enjoy the learning process. There's many different ways that you can do that to get your message across to the reader. That's one way of citing a paraphrase. Another way of citing a paraphrase is at the end of that paraphrase, you will put in brackets the author's name, comma, year of publication, close brackets, full stop. And there are other ways of citing as well. If you've got more than 3 authors, then you need to put et al. When you're citing a source that has got more than 3 authors, then you need to put the first author's surname, et al., and then you put the year of the publication, close brackets. The next one is about the referencing list. And the referencing list has to be at the end of your assignment. What is that for? The referencing list is more or less a guide for your reader. Similar to the guide that you've used when you're doing in-text citation to help the reader know, yes, okay, Jones 2012 said this. Okay, that's cool, that's great. But if your reader wants to know a little bit more information about Jones 2012, for example, then he's going to check your reference list at the back of your assignment. So that means your reference list has to match your citations, in-text citations. So they have to match, okay? Now, I've seen students, all kinds of different students, PhD students and everything, even lecturers do it as well. One of the biggest traps that's happened to the best students that I've ever tutored, they run out of time or something, or they run out of energy. They've got to submit that assignment. They're really running out of time. They have to submit that assignment really fast. Oops, what did they do wrong? Their in-text citations do not match with the reference list. You're going to get scored down for that. Probably a good idea, as I said earlier at the beginning of the video, is that you need to be systematic when you're doing referencing. So that means at the end of your assignment, when you're completely finished, you need to match your in-text citations to see, okay, Jones 2012 is, I've used him, I've used his work. So Jones 2012 has to be referenced on your reference list. So you've got to make sure that Jones 2012 reference is there. How do you solve that problem? You're using Microsoft Word, but what you want to do is have a search bar open in Microsoft Word and type in Jones, and it'll show you how many times you've used Jones in the in-text assignment. Go through how many times you've seen it, And at the very end, you should see, okay, I've referenced Jones 2012 and I've also used him in the text in my assignment. So that's great. So be careful about that. And of course, the opposite can happen. Some people, they like to put all the references first in the reference list, and then they'll start and get on to do their assignment. We are all different. We all have different approaches. So you might end up putting Jones 2012 in your reference list, but then as you're being creative and you're being critical and you're in the zone, you're getting things done and you're doing a great job in your assignment, but you might feel that you don't need Jones 2012, or maybe you found another author who is better than Jones 2012. So then you haven't used Jones, but then you've got him there. So these are the small little things anyway that I want to stress to you that you need to be aware of, and don't let those mistakes happen. This part of the video is how to reference from a book. In the Harvard referencing style, there are many different types of informations out there, types of research, different types of sources that exist. It's important to know how to reference each type of information properly. We're going to be looking at how to reference a book, right? Let's get to it. When I'm talking about referencing a book, I'm talking about the reference list at the back. How do you present that information there at the back? First of all, you need to be aware there are 6 pieces of information. First piece of information is the author's surname. Maybe you'd like to call it the author's last name, comma, and then the first initial of their first name. For example, if the author is called Stephen Smith 2012, you would put Smith as his last name, and then you would put a comma, and his first name is Stephen, so you'd put S, Smith, comma, S, and then a full stop. You might have some sources of information, as I've said earlier, which have got more than 3 editors, perhaps. They could be editors or authors' names. You've got to include all the names from that source, okay? But always put the first author's name that they mention in that source should be the same as what you include here. In terms of citations, any sources that have got more than 3 authors or editors, we put et al. E-T-A-L. We've put that there in the in-text, but we cannot put, this is a little small mistake that a lot of you are still putting et al. In the reference list at the back. Do not do that. You have to include all the names of the authors in the same order as you found from your source. That brings us to the second piece of information that you will need to reference a book, and that second piece of information is the year of the publication, which has to be in brackets. And also, a little sneaky one is sometimes when you're reading a book, you might get confused about what the year is of the publication. Because sometimes you might pick up a book which is the 5th or the 7th edition of that book. Whatever year of publication information you can find, which is the earliest year, that is the year of the publication that you want. The third piece of information is the title of the book. That's probably the most important information. You would put the book title, and sometimes a book title will have a subheading. You could put the book title ... and put the subheading as well. Now, the book title and the subtitle or the subheading should be in italic. The fourth piece of information is including the edition. Which edition number is it? If it's the 2nd edition or the 3rd or the 4th and so on, you should put that information in there as EDN with the edition number. If it's the 1st edition, you don't need to put that information. But if it's the 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 4th edition, whatever, it's better if you put that information in there. If that information is not available in the book, that's absolutely fine. The main point of referencing at the end of your assignment is to try to include as much detail as possible. The 5th piece of information when referencing a book is the place of the publication. Where was the book published? Was it published in London, in Budapest, or wherever it was published, New York? So you would put the city, it's usually the city of the place of the publication, and then you would put ... with the publisher. So what is the final piece of information? The 6th piece of information that you need to reference a book in the reference list at the back of your assignment is it's usually all the extra information, okay? Now, as I said earlier, this extra information is what your professor or your marker or your teacher or your supervisor, people who are grading you. This is to do with their preferences of what they expect to see. So that extra information goes at the end, the sixth piece of information. And what is that? That is the series number. You might also put the volume number if it's a direct quote, and even if it isn't a direct quote, put the page numbers as well at the end with a little pp dot page 2 dash to page 7, the range of pages that you've used. Students, that's it. That's how you reference a book. We are done with book referencing now. Oh my God. Feel free to come back to either this video or another video that I'm going to make, which you can use to remind yourself in a very quick way about referencing.